All right, yeah! Thank God for fantasy football. I'm Buster Brown, and the show, it's called Redemption Rehab. And if you tuned in today, it's for one reason. It's to start winning championships in fantasy football. Here we are on our website, fantasyfootballredemptionrehab.com. When you get a chance, check it out. Today, we're here talking about our weekly waiver wire report, where we help you find impact players week in and week out to help you win a championship in 2020. So buckle up, get out your popcorn, and let's head over to the chalkboard
and check out the facts.
Okay, here we are in week 8 of the NFL season. We're talking about the weekly waiver wire report, and behind me is ESPN.com. We're going to use them to highlight some of the players we like that you should be considering to pick up on your waiver wire for this week. We always start out our waiver wire report with our quick hits, and we really like some guys like we've been telling you about, Tua Tagovailoa. Last couple weeks we told you to pick him up. Well, now he's starting this week against the Rams. He may not pan out this week for a lot of points, but I can tell you what, by the end of the season, this kid could be in the running for Rookie of the Year. I suggest you go out and pick him up. Other guys that I'm not so high on, in Dallas, Ben DiNucci is playing for the injured Andy Dalton. Man, he's in for big trouble this week, because we told you, Dallas's offensive line is totally banged up. They look in disarray. We don't like Ben DiNucci, but if you don't have a choice, what are you supposed to do? Ben DiNucci might be someone you want to get on your waiver wire for week 8. And we also like Derek Carr against the Cleveland Browns. The weather's supposed to be in the mid-50s. The Raiders aren't used to that. But going up against a weak Cleveland secondary, I think that you might find that Derek Carr might have some touchdowns this week. Let's check out some defenses we like. We told you about Kansas City last week. Kansas City put up like 25 points on defense. We told you we liked them. They went out and did it. We like them again this week against the New York Jets. Keep them in your lineup. If you need another defense, how about Philadelphia going up against the Dallas's banged up offensive line? We just talked about it. Dallas's offensive line is totally banged up, and Philly's defense should have a field day. And if you need a good kicker, let me suggest the Buffalo Bill kicker. This guy went out and kicked 6 field goals. His name is Tyler Bass. And you get a chance, and if you need a field goal kicker, we suggest Tyler Bass of the Buffalo Bills. When we come back, we're going to be checking out running backs that you can get in week 8 of the NFL season off the waiver wire. Okay, here we are talking about running backs for week 8 of the NFL waiver wire report. Last week we told you about Jeff Wilson of the San Francisco 49ers. If you went out and picked him up, he would have got you 3 touchdowns. And man, he put up like 25 points against New England. You should have went out and picked up Jeff Wilson, and you heard about it here on Redemption Rehab. Another guy we told you about that went out and played well was Giovanni Bernard of Cincinnati Bengals. What did he do? He put up 20 points in fantasy football by scoring a touchdown against the Cleveland Browns. But we didn't stop there. We told you, keep an eye on Boston Scott of the Philadelphia Eagles. What did he do? He put up 20 points in fantasy football also by scoring a touchdown last week. Look, you got to stay tuned to Fantasy Football Redemption Rehab if you want players like those guys. Who do we like this week? Well, how about this guy? Chase Edmonds of the Arizona Cardinals. Look, he's on bye this week, but look what he did last week. Kenyon Drake's hurt, so he's out for a month. But Chase Edmonds had 5 carries for 58 yards. But what he did is down here in the passing game. He had 7 receptions for 87 yards. Look, the kid can play football. And if you want a good player, it's this guy. If he's on your waiver wire, go get him, spend the money. Because I tell you what, for the next month, maybe for the rest of the season, he's going to be a big cog in the wheel for Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals. If you need another guy who might be on your waiver wire, it's in the same game. Look at this. Carlos Hyde over here had 15 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown, and Carlos Hyde can catch the ball out of the backfield. He only had 3 catches in this game for 8 yards on 4 targets, but I tell you what, once Chris Carson went down, who else do they have? We told you that Rashad Penny's coming back from the PUP. He's been hurt since the beginning of the year, but he's not practicing. I threw him on my bench in every league. If he's not practicing in the next week or so, I'm going to cut him loose. The Seattle Seahawks need running backs, and they got this guy, a first-round pick a few years ago, sitting there waiting to come back from injury. Remember the name? Rashad Penny and Carlos Hyde. Let's take a look at some other running backs we really like for Week 8 of the NFL season. Last week, we told you about Jeff Wilson of the San Francisco 49ers. He went out and scored 3 touchdowns, but he got hurt. But they do have other running backs. They got Jerick McKinnon, who might be on your waiver wire, and JaMycal Hasty, a rookie for the San Francisco 49ers that might get some playing time. If Tevin Coleman, who's been on IR, comes back, he might be somebody you want to check out on your waiver wire also for the San Francisco 49ers. And if those guys aren't available, you might want to check out this guy. His name is La'Mical Perine. He's a rookie. He only had 2 receptions for 16 yards right here on 3 targets, but he also had 11 carries for 39 yards and a touchdown. He's playing behind Frank Gore. They traded Le'Veon Bell. They're playing against Le'Veon Bell, so Frank Gore and La'Mical Perine might want to show this guy up on Sunday. So if you can get one of Frank Gore or La'Mical Perine on your waiver wire, you should go out and do it. I think they're going to have a good game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's go take a look at some other running backs I like. Okay, here we are taking a look at a running back for the New York Giants. Once Saquon Barkley went down, the Giants picked up Devonta Freeman. But he got banged up last week against the Philadelphia Eagles. And in comes a guy we've mentioned since Saquon Barkley got hurt, and his name is Wayne Gallman. Look what Wayne Gallman did. Wayne Gallman had 10 carries for 34 yards and a touchdown. He also caught 5 balls for 20 yards on 5 targets. Look, that's a 20-point night out of this guy. He's got a tough game coming up this weekend, but I can tell you right now, who else do they have to run the ball? Devonta Freeman's picked up. Dion Lewis isn't doing much. This is his time to shine. If you need a guy for a couple weeks, Wayne Gallman might be your guy, and he might be the only thing the Giants have at running back that's any good. When we come back, we're going to take a look at some wide receivers you should be looking at for Week 8 of the NFL season. Since we're on this box score with the New York Giants and Philadelphia Eagles, we thought we'd highlight some of the players that might be on your waiver wire that should have a good week in Week 8. One of the wide receivers we want to mention is this guy over here, Sterling Shepard for the New York Giants. He had 6 catches for 59 yards and a TD on 8 targets. Some people cut him earlier in the year. They shouldn't have. But if he's on your waiver wire, go get him. He's one of the main cogs in the wheels for the New York Giants, and he's going to have a big rest of the season if he stays healthy. As far as the Philadelphia Eagles go, there are some players that we like with them too. And one of them is this guy right here, Greg Ward. He had 5 catches for 42 yards, a touchdown on 6 targets. Hey, that's 15, 16 points, and he hasn't done a whole lot this year. But I tell you what, they don't have a lot of people to throw the ball to. We've been telling you, pick up Alshon Jeffries. Find out he's on the trading block. He might not play again in Week 8. He might get traded. You might want to consider picking him up if he's available. And there's a guy named Jalen Reagor for the Philadelphia Eagles who just came off the IR, and he might get some playing time. These are all going to be players that are going to show up in Week 8, Week 9, and score some points at wide receiver. Since we're on this box score, I want to mention this guy. We mentioned him at tight end last week, Richard Rodgers. He had 6 catches for 85 yards on 8 targets. We're not talking about tight ends, but since we're on this box score, we think you should go out and pick him up also. When we come back, we got some more wide receivers we're going to look at for Week 8 of the NFL season. Okay, here we are looking at the Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland Browns box score. And when Odell Beckham went down, it opened the door for a couple of people you should keep your eye on and possibly pick up on your waiver wire this week, starting out with this guy. His name is Rashard Higgins. He had 6 catches for 110 yards on 6 targets. Look, when Odell Beckham went down, this was the guy that took his spot. He's going to play a big role for the Cleveland Browns the rest of the year. And another guy you might want to keep an eye on is this guy right here, Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's a rookie. He had 3 catches for 56 yards, a touchdown on 3 targets. These guys, somebody has to fill the role for Odell Beckham, and it's going to be these 2 guys. I think the guy you should get is Rashard Higgins, but Dante Peoples-Jones might steal some targets. Notice this guy above here. We told you about him at tight end, Harrison Bryant. We've been on this guy all year. We told you he was going to have a big game last week because of the injuries that the Browns have at tight end. This guy stepped up to the plate, and he had 4 catches for 56 yards and 2 touchdowns, along with his other tight end, David Njoku, we told you about last week. He had 2 catches for 20 yards and a touchdown. Look, we're not talking tight ends, we're talking wide receivers, but when we do talk tight ends, these are 2 of the tight ends that you should be picking up in week 8 of the NFL season until they get healthy with their starters. Other guys we think you should be considering at wide receiver that aren't on this box score, that are veterans. Larry Fitzgerald had a big game. He caught like 8 balls for 60 plus yards for the Arizona Cardinals. I think Larry Fitzgerald will see a lot more targets the rest of the year. And another guy that might be on your waiver wire that's a veteran that people got tired of hanging on to was Curtis Samuels of the Carolina Panthers. If he's on your waiver wire, go pick him up. He had a good game last week, scored almost 20 fantasy points, and I think you should go get him. When we come back, we're going to show you a couple more players you should be considering at wide receiver for week 8 of the NFL season. Okay, if you need a couple of wide receivers to help you get through bye weeks or injuries, we've got 2 of them here for you. Starting out with this guy, and his name is Scotty Miller. Scotty Miller had 6 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown on 9 targets. Look, we've mentioned him all year. He had 3 or 4 games where he didn't do anything. Then he comes in and scores, 20-some points. Well, I could see why. Mike Evans is banged up. Chris Godwin broke his finger. He had to have surgery on Tuesday, so he might miss some time. They just signed Antonio Brown, but this guy's been there, and I can tell you right now, Tom Brady likes him. He's a good wide receiver, and I think he could help you get through the bye weeks or some injuries. Another guy in this same game that we really like is this guy, and his name is Nelson Agholor. Nelson Agholor has put up double digits the last 3 weeks, and in this game, he caught 5 receptions for 107 yards and a touchdown on 9 targets. Look, the Raiders are like 32nd in the league throwing the ball to the wide receivers. But if they're going to throw the ball to the wide receivers, it's clearly Nelson Agholor, and he plays against a banged-up Cleveland secondary. He will have to go up against a really good cornerback, and his name is Ward for Cleveland, and he's really good. He might shut him down, so I'd be careful with this guy this week, but don't be surprised if down the road, Nelson Agholor, formerly of the Philadelphia Eagles, stands out the rest of the year. When we come back and we end this, we're going to show you some tight ends we like for week 8 of the NFL season. Okay, tight end was a big week for us last week. We told you to go out and get Robert Roberts for the Philadelphia Eagles. He scored a lot of fantasy points. We told you to go out and get Harrison Bryant. He only scored 25 fantasy points. You should have went out and got him. We told you about David Njoku. He went out and would have got you 15 fantasy points. And we told you about this guy. We call him Albert O, but his real name down here is Albert Okwuegbunam. He had 7 receptions for 60 yards and 7 targets. Look, with the injuries that the Denver Broncos have and the struggles they're having at running the ball, they're running, the 2 tight end set a lot. So that means that Noah Fant's going to get some playing time, and so is Albert O. That's what we call him, Albert O. You would have known about him if you would have watched our rookies tight end preview that we did back in April. We mentioned this guy. We told you he was going to have a decent year as a rookie, and here he is putting up points in fantasy football. We call him Albert O. He's the tight end for the Denver Broncos. If you get a chance, you might want to go stash him on your bench. We've got one more guy we want to show you at tight end for week 8 in the NFL season. His name is Logan Thomas of the Washington football team. Okay, here we are looking at a tight end for the Washington football team, and his name's Logan Thomas. We've talked about him all year. We've mentioned him a lot in our daily fantasy sports thing we do for FanDuel. If you get a chance, check that out. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do it last week because I got sick, but hey, It happens. So let's take a look at his stats from week 7. And as you can see here, he had 4 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. Look, that right there is 16, 17 points in daily fantasy sports, or whether it's a PPR league. And he's not going to put up points like this every week. But who else do they have to throw the ball to besides this guy and Terry McLaurin? I think he might be a viable tight end. I think they're on bye this week, so you can't use him in week 8, but he might be a tight end you could use later on. Well, there you have it. We gave you all the impact players we promised to help you fill out your rosters this week in fantasy football. I'm Buster Brown. The show is called Redemption Rehab. Good luck.